We had a little time for me to go back and reflect on what we're doing and decide how it's going as a curriculum.
Right.
One thing that you can see in the message bar are things that I think we could have gone over. Some of them we should have, and some of them it seemed like you had well in hand for the design of Kinfolk already, and so I treated them pretty much as fixed, and not as options. But we should recognize them as options. For example, having the 5-session framework is obviously one of them. And then there's a couple of other things too. One of the most important has to do with my breakdown of characters as concepts. I don't know if you're familiar with this, where I talk about these sort of 4 levels or layers of what a character's identity is. Have you ever? I don't know if you've heard of that. Okay.
No, I haven't heard that one.
Okay. Well, the idea here goes. I've actually had reason a little bit ago to hunt down the original thread at the Forge, which was ages and ages ago.
Right.
But if we take a look at the game variables, classically race, class, alignment, and so forth, or whatever variables a given game might actually have, then we're talking about whatever that gestalt is at the moment. So I don't really care how it's constructed in the game as such, except I will in a minute. But we need to know what it is first. So basically, you could probably anticipate this. I talk about how there's the personal creator's level, which relates to the character pretty much relative to the purposes of play. So we're talking about whether the person pretty much feels like they want to play this guy toward the purposes of play that this game's about, particularly relative to the other people. So,
people being characters or people being other players?
People being other players. So that this level, I'm saying, well, I'm playing with Justin and I'm playing with Nicole, and I'm playing with Nicole's sister, whom I don't know yet. And we're playing together, and we have these kind of relationships that are either well known to us or developing among us, and I'm playing a character that can be articulated in those terms. We don't like to do it. People shy away from articulating a character's purpose and role in those interactions. But it is a very strong thing. It's a real thing. There's nothing we can do about it, and it is a feature of a character's identity. It just is. So that's one. Go ahead.
Do you mean to say? Sorry. Is that referring to like the sort of metagame relationships that we bring with other players, or is that referring kind of to like the reward loops? I'm not sure.
Right. I'm referring specifically to the social interactions among the people. I tend not to call that metagame. I tend to call that reality.
Okay.
I mean, maybe that's quibbling terminologically, but it's actually kind of important. Okay. And so then the next one, or the next layer, I don't know if these are nested or not. They could be just a spectrum. Or you can think of them as nested. But the next one is we're thinking about what we're doing with these characters fictionally as a group. I mean, if they're a Black Ops squad, or if they are a solver of mysteries, or whether they're survivors of hazards, or whatever it is we do with them. Particularly insofar as we act collectively with them. what is my guy's role in that? If we're talking about me as being kind of and I'm not saying me personally, but if we're talking about me as some guy as a player, and say they have kind of a leader type personality and they tend to act like that toward other people, that would be in the first layer insofar as it informs the character. Or we could be talking about how this character is somewhat constructed as this leader type and everybody else is sort of into this as the collective effort, part of the collective effort. That's the second layer.
Gotcha. That helped me understand the first better. Thank you.
And then the third one is the one that was getting into the kind of stuff that is maybe a bit of a relief, because this is what you open up a rule book and find. The third one is a designated classification of the character in the text's own terms. So I might say my fantasy hero half-elf ranger is built on 200 points, and he's got these skills and those disadvantages. But I'm actually getting ahead of myself. Let me start all over again. It would be the classification elements. I would say things like, I used the half-elf package. I used 200 points. And it's not really customized yet. These are these categorization terms that make everybody else comfortable with what my character is and gives us a very sketchy view of what they're about and can do. So we would use the same terms if I were a different person at a different table. They might say half-elf ranger at 200 points too. You see, so that's what I mean. These generalizable or transferable classifications of characters. But this is very important because this has a lot to do with where they stand relative to all the other characters too. So then, finally, the fourth is where I customize. That's where I'm saying his name is this, maybe he's a totally urbanized half-elf who absolutely hates the countryside and loves, subverting that stereotype of elf toward all and sundry. Maybe he's got his longsword in one hand and his throwing hatchet, or his dual fighting and throwing hatchet in the other. Maybe all these things. So this is where the character is taking on certain nuances of interaction and tactics that are highly customized and indicative very much of what I decided to do with my half-elf.
So is individual customization purely in the realm of sort of choices offered by the player, or would builds work into that?
Well,
out of the classification,
builds,
you might have
I guess what I'm talking about are the things which, in the third layer, like I said, are transferable from person to person. You could say, I'm playing my half-elf fighter thief, and the guy next to me says, oh yeah, I'm playing a half-elf fighter thief too.
Gotcha.
And so when those two statements are equivalent, that's that third layer.
Okay.
And a good way to look at it is the characters. It's what other people in the fiction would say about the character before they knew them very well. So it's very much in the rules terms like builds, but it's phrased and thought of as the fictional phrasing.
Gotcha.
With these in mind, I hope you can see that these are actually can be quite independent of each other, but they always inform one another.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. The way they inform each other. And one of my big trips about this is to say that it's a really bad idea to assume that what you specify in the terminology of one level is necessarily going to force you to act with that character a certain way at another level. The classic situation is when you are, playing, you say, I'll play the cleric. And let's say that in this sense, somebody interprets that to mean that you're going to be playing the healer the stabilizer, the backer-upper, the big guns for undead, and basically the one who makes everybody else in the party's game up because they're there.
Right.
And stereotypically, when you say, I want to play the cleric, everybody kind of says, oh, good, we've kind of got that all-party backstopping in hands now.
Right.
Now, that actually, if you think about it, is a level 2 statement.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
But the problem with that is, and this is when the problem with even using the word cleric, which is an in-fiction term, to use it at that level 2, is that all of a sudden I turn around and I show up with my half-orc cleric assassin.
Right.
Which, as I've been talking about recently online, is a really strong build in first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Long lost to gaming culture, I'm sorry to say. But yes, the half-orc cleric assassin, and since the assassin is enjoined to be an evil alignment, forced to be, you're talking about a very, very strong and interesting build for a character, but it's not according with that level 2 that everybody assumed as soon as I said the word cleric.
Yeah, one of the first things that occurred to me as you went through them all was the one classic thing that I've seen happen a lot, and I'm guilty of, is that I have a fair amount of gift of gab, especially in gaming, and there's always that issue of like the DM's like, "What's your charisma? Why are you talking so much?"
Right.
So as a person in the first section, I can be a little charismatic, but if I'm not playing a charismatic character,
right,
I may still do it.
Now, the important thing to recognize, though, is that we need to decide for ourselves what the proper interaction among these levels are, but not to assume that the one must dictate the other. There are plenty of players in your exact position who would say, fuck you, DM.
Right.
When and if the numbers matter for my character's charisma, I'm fine. I'm fine with my low score. But until then, as far as playing my guy as according my level 1 of hanging out with you guys is concerned,
right,
up yours.
Right.
And the DM goes, but your charisma, right? Pointing at level 4, right? The actual charisma score, and like try poking it like a button, and the player saying that ain't connected to level 1, man. There's no wire there.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. Is that they are different, and whether they're hardwired is very much one of those social contract things that you better know for a given table, or else you're screwed.
Right.